Semi-detached properties in the 416 are down almost 10% in price year over year from July of 2025 to July of 2026. What's happening with semis? Hello, everybody. It's Alex Drobin with Remax. I help people just like you buy and sell real estate in Toronto. If you get any value from this video whatsoever, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, just put them down in the comments below. Let's get into this market update. Okay, so Toronto home prices are down 4.5% from July of 2025 to July of 2026, but that's actually not the most important part of this real estate market update. Because while the sales are basically flat compared to last July, the numbers of new listings that are coming to the market have dropped off by almost 18%. That means that there's 18% less new homes that are coming onto the market from July of 2025 to July of 2026. And that's a big number and a significant change because for the last little while, Toronto buyers have had, a ton of inventory to choose from, little to no urgency in most cases. Again, very neighborhood dependent. If you're in a prime neighborhood, you still have a bit of urgency if you're a buyer looking at great properties. But in many cases, buyers have had significantly more negotiating power than they have like 2-3 years ago. But if inventory continues to fall while sales stay relatively stable, some of that leverage could start disappearing. So is the Toronto buyers market finally starting to shift? Let's take a look at these numbers. Let's start with sales. Across the GTA, there were only 5,995 sales in July, and that's only a 0.9% decrease compared to July of last year, so July of 2025. So demand hasn't really come roaring back, but it also hasn't fallen off very much. Now, compare that with listings. There were 14,484 new listings in July, and that's down a massive 17.8% from last year. Again, that's a huge number. And total active listings were also down 12.1% to just over 26,000 properties. And to me, this is probably the biggest story in this entire report. Sales aren't increasing dramatically. It seems like sellers are just kind of pulling back from the market much faster than buyers are. And I've seen that with my own sellers. If somebody doesn't get a number they want within a month to say 2 months of being listed on the MLS, people just want to take the property off the market and retry it in a different season. So for example, I had a couple of listings that were listed, up until midsummer, and I had clients be like, okay, let's take it off the market and put it back on the market in October or in September or October during the fall season. So while these numbers make sense right now, I think we'll see significantly more inventory on the market in September, October, and even into like mid-November. But when you have fewer homes coming onto the market while demand stays relatively stable, conditions naturally start to tighten a little bit. So the numbers I'm watching, here's another way of looking at it. If we take the 5,995 sales and compare that with the 14,484 new listings, we get a new sales to new listings ratio of roughly 41%. Last July, that number is about 34%. That's a pretty significant move. Now, I'm not saying we've suddenly entered in some crazy seller's market again. I absolutely do not think that. I do think it's still a buyer's market for the most part in most neighborhoods in the city, excluding some top neighborhoods like I always mention in these videos: Bloor West, High Park, Roncy, Swansea, The Junction, some of Lawrence Park, Forest Hill, places like that. But for the most part, it's still a buyer's market. But we're not seeing inventory pile up at the same pace it was before, and that's something buyers and sellers need to pay attention to heading into the fall market. Again, I think the fall market will show a ton of new inventory. I know for a fact that like we're listing a bunch of places in the fall, September, October. Me, myself, I probably have 5 or 6 listings coming out within the next couple of months. And then a bunch of agents that I know in the city are listing a ton of properties. So I think there will be more inventory to choose from within the next couple of months. Let's talk about prices, because prices are still down. The average GTA home sold for just over $1 million in July, and that's now 4.5% compared to last year. The MLS Home Price Index benchmark was also down about 4.6%. So despite the tightening, we're also starting to see an inventory. Prices have not recovered yet. And again, there's a very important distinction. I hate to keep repeating myself, but if you look at specific neighborhoods, like the neighborhoods we specialize in, the very desirable properties tend to sell very quickly in multiple offer and bidding war situations. So if you're thinking about selling and you have like a four bedroom, 5 bathroom, renovated, detached house with a private drive, you'll still get a premium price if you're in a great neighborhood. Now let's look at the sales and average price by every major home type, starting with the detached market. So the average price of a detached home in the 416 in July of 2026 is 1,547,000, which is down 1.5% year over year from July of 2025 to July of 2026. Now, again, fairly steady, 1.5% difference, and that's going from July to July. Doesn't make that big of a difference. And like I said before, if you're in a great neighborhood and you have a special property, you're still going to get a premium price for it. There's been multiple situations over the last couple of months where there have been properties that were listed correctly and say like the mid twos to high two mark with an offer date situation. They get multiple offers, a bidding war, and they end up selling for significantly over that asking price. So the detached market really these prices for detached properties really depend on where you are. And if you're looking for an evaluation for what your home is worth, just give me a shout. Not to plug this, but we come by, it's a 15-minute evaluation, and then we come by with a comparative market analysis telling you exactly how much we can get for your property in today's market. But yeah, the average price of a detached home is just under 1.55 million in the 416, down 1.5% year over year. And then the sales are up 2.8% year over year from July of 2025 to July of 2026. This is the wildest stat in this whole report because the average price of a semi-detached home in the 416 in July of 2026 is 1,122,000, which is down almost 10% year over year from July of 2025 to July of 2026. And then the number of sales, the sales volume has gone down by 6.8% year over year as well. What's the reason behind that? So why is this happening? Okay, I want to go back to what I was saying in the last couple of reports that I've done. I think it's because people are reaching for higher priced properties up to $1.5 million. Average price of a semi, $1.122 million. And then if you look at the detached market, literally $1.547 million for detached property. So because you don't have to have 20% down to purchase something up to 1.5 million, I think a lot of people are reaching a little bit higher into that, 1.45, $1.5 million price range to try to get a detached property over a semi. So I think there just hasn't been as much demand for semi-detached properties, and that's reflected in the number of sales because like I said before, the sales volume is down 6.8% year over year, July of 2025 to July of 2026. But 10% decrease in price, like that's a big number. So I'm keeping an eye on the semi-detached market. I think we'll have a fresh set of numbers in the fall, in September specifically. And we'll kind of see where that goes because right now the market's fairly dead. There aren't too many really nice listings out right now, and we're going to see that completely shift within the first 3 to 4 weeks of September and going into October. So I can't wait for those numbers to come out for, like September, October, just to have them reflect what's happening in the fall market. Because as we all know, and as I've said this so many times, we're a very cyclical market. It's very busy in the fall, it's very busy in the spring, and it's completely dead in the summer. So the numbers will reflect what's happening in the market a little bit better once we see what's happening in September, October. I feel like I repeated myself like 10 times there. Okay, the average price of a Toronto townhome in the 416 in July of 2026 is $867,000, which is down 6% year over year from July of 2025 to July of 2026. Similar situation here. People are looking at higher priced properties because they can, afford more. And then the sales volume is up 8.7% year over year, which is actually quite a big difference. So prices of townhomes are coming down and the sales are coming up. So some people are like, you know what? If we can get a great townhouse, 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms in a great location in the city, we'd rather go for that and spend less than $900,000 as opposed to go for a semi-detached property where you see how big of a price difference it is. 867,000 to 1,121,000. Quick math, that's like, $250,000 difference. Condos. The average price for Toronto condo in the 416 in July of 2026 is $672,000, which is down 1.6% year over year, and sales volume is up 3.3%. Again, I've said this before, I still don't think we've seen what's happening with the condo market and just how much lower these prices will go because there's so much condo inventory on the market, especially those 1 bedrooms and 1+ dens. So a little higher sales volume. We've had historically low sales volume over the last few years, the last couple of years for condos, but it's up slightly, 3.3%. And then the average price is down 1.6% year over year. So again, In the fall, we'll see significantly more condo inventory. September, October, there will be plenty of people who try to list and sell their properties in, the late spring and the beginning of summer that weren't able to sell that will relist their properties on the market. So my biggest takeaways here, the semi-detached market being down 10% year over year is a bit of a wild stat. So I really want to keep an eye on those numbers. And again, I think it's because people are reaching for higher price points. The townhouse market is moving a little bit more. So 8.7% more sales volume year over year from July of 2025 to July of 2026. And I still don't think we've seen what's happening with condos. About the detached side, if you have a really nice, desirable property that's fully renovated, finished, 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, great lot, great location, you're still getting a premium price with multiple offer bidding war situations. What does this mean for buyers? If you're a buyer right now, I still think there are tons of opportunities, and there will be even more opportunities in the fall. Prices are lower than last year. Many properties are sitting longer. There's still sellers out there who need to sell, but I wouldn't automatically assume that that's going to last forever, because if new listings continue to fall, like, year over year, they just fell 17.8%, then you're just going to have less inventory to choose from. So there's probably going to be less negotiating power, more competition when you're looking for a place. And if demand starts improving, especially if borrowing costs become a little bit more favorable, you could suddenly have more buyers competing for fewer properties. And that's regardless of the situation, that's the case in most super desirable neighborhoods. And that's exactly how negotiating power starts shifting back towards the seller. So if you find the right property at the right price today, I wouldn't necessarily wait for some massive additional market correction that may or may not happen. I don't know if you watched my interview with Dave Thompson, amazing mortgage broker, but he had a really good point. And he was like, what's your opportunity cost of waiting 2, 3 more years to get into a bigger house with your family? If you're looking for a bigger space, then it's like your opportunity cost is, not watching your kids grow up in a big backyard as opposed to, a townhouse or a place with a small backyard. You should go listen to that interview if you have a chance. But, the opportunity cost of waiting to purchase something bigger and enjoy your house with a growing family is fairly high. So if you find the right property that you're really interested in and you love, don't hesitate. I would still pull the trigger on it. If you're keeping it for 7 to 10 years, you're most likely not going to lose on it. So what does this mean for sellers? For sellers, I think July gives us a bit more reason for optimism. You're competing against fewer new listings than you were a year ago. So again, we'll see what happens in this fall market. But if new listings continue to slow down, there are going to be significantly less new listings on the market month over month, year over year. Then you're going to have more competition on those listings. There's buyers are still out there. I know I work with a bunch of buyers right now. So there's still demand, but pricing is absolutely critical. Buyers are extremely educated right now. Of course, they have access to all the comparable sales. They're watching properties sit on the market. If you have a good realtor, you'll have somebody jump on a property really quickly as well. And they're not generally willing to overpay unless, again, it's a beautiful property in a great neighborhood. So this isn't the market where you list like $200,000-$300,000 over market value and just see what happens, because your property will sit on the market for a long time. But if you price it properly, prepare it properly, stage it, clean it, get it ready and prepped, you can get a really good price for your listing. And again, if you're thinking about selling, give me a call, send me a message. We'll do a comparative market analysis. I'll go through my presentation, tell you exactly what we do to sell properties for the highest price possible, and kind of take it from there. Sometimes I'll work with people right off the bat, and sometimes people call me 2, 3 years later. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments. And if you're thinking about making a move, I'll put a link in the description of this video where you can set up a time to chat with me. Thanks again and have a great day.